They say karma doesn't fly coach, but on Flight 447 it was seated in 2A. Ava Kingston didn't look like power when she stepped onto Flight 447 from London Heathrow to JFK that Friday evening. She looked like exhaustion wrapped in a hoodie. Her black curls were pulled into a messy bun, her face bare of makeup, and her oversized sweatshirt had a faded logo from some indie design collective no one outside of East London had heard of. Noise-canceling headphones hung around her neck like a warning. Don't bother me. She wasn't trying to be invisible. She just was. That was the thing about Ava. She'd perfected the art of blending in. 23 years old, 5'6", and carrying herself with the kind of quiet confidence that came from never needing to prove anything to anyone. She'd spent the last 6 months in London, finishing a design internship at a boutique creative agency, learning the craft, staying grounded. No entourage, no fanfare, just her sketchbook, and a dream to build something hers. Her boarding pass read 2A, first class. Her last name, her mother's maiden name, Reeves, because when your father is Donovan Kingston, billionaire founder and CEO of Nova Air, one of the top 5 airlines in the world, anonymity isn't just a preference, it's survival. She slipped past the gate agent with a polite nod, walked down the jet bridge, and stepped into the cabin. The air was cool, sterile, tinged with that faint, new leather scent that first-class cabins always had. Soft jazz hummed through hidden speakers. The seats were wide, cream-colored, wrapped in luxury. A few passengers were already settled in. A man in a crisp navy suit tapping furiously on his laptop, a woman with diamond earrings sipping champagne, an older couple whispering in French. Ava found her seat, 2A, window side, and sank into it with a sigh that came from somewhere deep. She pulled out her phone, opened her notes app, and stared at the half-finished sketch of a dress she'd been working on. Clean lines, bold asymmetry, something that felt like her. But her mind wasn't on fashion. It was on home. New York. Her dad. Her little brother Isaiah, who'd been texting her nonstop about some new drone he'd built. Her mom, who always made jollof rice the night Ava came back, even though Ava insisted she didn't need the fuss. She missed them. She didn't miss the name, though, the weight of it, the assumptions. The way people's faces changed when they found out who her father was. The fake smiles, the suddenly interested investors, the influencers who wanted to be her best friend. That's why she flew as Ava Reeves. That's why she dressed down. That's why she kept her head low and her circle small. But tonight, she was tired. Bone tired. The kind of tired that came from 6 months of proving yourself in a city that didn't care who your father was, because they didn't know. She leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. Just a few hours. Then home. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, you just walked into something wild. I need you to drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from? London? Lagos? Los Angeles? Let me know, because this story, it's going to make your blood boil and your heart soar, all in the same breath. And hey, if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do it now. Trust me, you're going to want to be here for what happens next. Now let me set the scene. The cabin filled slowly. A businesswoman in a pencil skirt, a tech bro with AirPods Max, a family with a fussy toddler who was not happy about being awake. The hum of conversation grew, blending with the rustle of carry-ons being shoved into overhead bins, and then she appeared. Rebecca Miles, 38, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, lips painted a sharp red, uniform pressed to perfection. She moved through the aisle with the kind of practiced grace that came from 15 years in the skies, but there was something else in her stride, something sharp. Something that looked like judgment dressed up as professionalism. She smiled at the man in the navy suit. "Good evening, sir. Champagne?" She leaned toward the woman with the diamonds. "Madam, may I take your coat?" She passed Ava without a word, not even a glance. Ava opened her eyes, watched Rebecca move down the aisle, and felt that familiar prickle at the back of her neck. The one that said, "You saw that, right?" She shook it off. Maybe she's just busy. The plane began to taxi. The seatbelt sign dinged on. The safety video played on the screen in front of her. Cheerful, animated, useless. Ava barely watched. She was scrolling through her phone, replying to a text from her best friend Zara. Zara, did you survive London, or did London survive you? Ava, barely, both of us limping. Home in 7 hours. Zara, can't wait to hear all the tea. Also, your dad better not try to put you in some VP role again. Ava, he knows better. I told him I'm doing my own thing. Zara, sir, see you soon, babe. Ava smiled and pocketed her phone just as the plane lifted off the ground. The cabin tilted, the engines roared, and London disappeared beneath a blanket of clouds. She exhaled. Almost there. 30 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign turned off. The cabin lights dimmed to that soft amber glow. Passengers stretched, reclined, pulled out laptops and books. The businesswoman ordered a gin and tonic. The man across the aisle asked for a hot towel. Ava's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since that morning. A sad croissant at the airport, eaten standing up while she answered emails. She'd pre-booked her meal weeks ago, the pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables. Nova Air's first-class menu was supposed to be incredible. She'd been looking forward to it. She pressed the call button. A soft chime. Rebecca appeared a moment later, her smile thin and rehearsed. Yes? Hi, Ava said politely, sitting up a little. I'd like to get my meal, please. I pre-ordered the salmon. Rebecca's eyes flicked over her. The hoodie, the bare face, the headphones. Her smile didn't move, but something behind it shifted. That's for premium passengers only, she said flatly. Ava blinked. I am a premium passenger. I'm in first class. Rebecca's gaze lingered on Ava's outfit, then slid to the empty champagne flute on the tray table across the aisle. Let me check your ticket. Ava pulled out her phone, opened her boarding pass, and held it up. Flight 447, seat 2A, first class. Rebecca leaned in, squinting at the screen. Then she straightened, folded her arms, and lowered her voice just enough that only Ava could hear. I don't know how you got up here, she said, her tone syrupy with condescension, but don't make a scene. The words hit like a slap. Ava's heart slammed against her ribs. Her mouth went dry. She stared at Rebecca, waiting for the punchline, the apology, the something that would make this make sense. But Rebecca just smiled, that same tight practice smile, and walked away. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, the soft jazz too loud, the amber lighting too dim. Ava sat frozen, her boarding pass still glowing on her phone screen, her pulse hammering in her ears. Did that just happen? She looked around. The man across the aisle, the one with the laptop, glanced at her, then quickly looked away. The woman with the diamonds pretended to read her magazine. The couple in French didn't even notice, but someone had heard. A white man 2 rows up turned in his seat, smirked, and muttered something to his companion. They both laughed. Quiet, knowing, cruel. Ava's chest tightened. She wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up and call Rebecca back and demand an apology in front of everyone. She wanted to... No. She took a slow breath, then another. Her hands were shaking. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and opened the camera app. If this was going to happen, she wasn't going to let it disappear into the air like it never mattered. She hit record. What happens next will leave you speechless. But here's the question. What would you have done in Ava's position? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. And if you're feeling this story already, smash that like button and let's keep going. Ava Kingston had learned early that silence could be a weapon, not the kind that cut or bruised, the kind that waited, the kind that observed, absorbed, and remembered everything. Her father had taught her that, not with words, but with example. Donovan Kingston didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When Ava was 7 years old, she'd watched him handle a business partner who'd tried to cheat him out of millions. The man had yelled, threatened, pounded his fist on the mahogany table in her father's office. And Donovan? He'd sat back in his chair, fingers steepled, dark eyes calm as still water. He'd let the man tire himself out. Then he'd stood, walked to the window, and said 4 words. Clean out your desk. The man was escorted out 10 minutes later. That night, over dinner, Ava had asked her father why he didn't yell back. Donovan had looked at her, really looked at her, the way he always did when he was about to say something important, and said, "Baby girl, People who need to shout are afraid no one's listening. But when you know your voice matters, you can whisper, and the whole room will lean in. Ava had never forgotten that. So now, 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, with her phone recording and her hands still trembling, she didn't shout, she didn't cry, she didn't make a scene. She waited. Rebecca returned 20 minutes later with a tray, not for Ava, but for the businessman across the aisle. Pan-seared salmon, roasted vegetables, a glass of white wine. The same meal Ava had pre-ordered. Rebecca set it down with a flourish. "Enjoy your meal, sir." The man grunted his thanks and didn't look up from his laptop. Ava's stomach twisted. She lowered her phone, stopped the recording, and tucked it back into her bag. Then she pulled out her headphones, slipped them on, and stared out the window at the endless stretch of clouds below. She wasn't hungry anymore. The flight stretched on. Hours blurred together. The cabin grew quieter. Passengers reclined their seats, pulled blankets over themselves, drifted into sleep. The hum of the engines became a lullaby. Ava didn't sleep. She sat there, eyes open, mind racing, replaying the moment over and over. "I don't know how you got up here." She'd heard variations of that line before. Not often. Her parents had made sure she grew up insulated, protected, loved, but enough times to recognize the poison underneath. When she was 16, she'd gone to a private gala with her mother. A woman in a Chanel gown had looked her up and down and said, "Oh, how wonderful that they're giving scholarships to girls like you." Ava had been wearing a custom Oscar de la Renta dress. Her mother had smiled tightly and steered her away before Ava could respond. When she was 19, she'd walked into a luxury boutique in Soho. The sales assistant had followed her around the store like she was about to shoplift. When Ava had pulled out her black card to pay for a leather jacket, the woman's face had gone pale. Ava had smiled sweetly and said, "I'll take two." But this felt different. This wasn't some stranger at a gala or a boutique. This was a flight attendant on her father's airline. An employee of Nova Air, the company Donovan had built from the ground up, the company that prided itself on world-class service for every traveler. Every traveler, unless you were black, and dressed down, and didn't look like you belonged. Ava clenched her jaw and forced herself to breathe. Stay calm, stay smart. By the time the plane began its descent into JFK, the sky outside had turned a deep navy blue, streaked with the first hints of dawn. The cabin lights flickered on. Passengers stirred, stretched, reached for their phones. Rebecca made one final sweep through the aisle, collecting trash, offering warm towels. When she reached Ava's row, she paused. "Anything I can get you before we land?" she asked, her tone clipped but polite. Ava looked up at her, held her gaze, didn't smile. "No," she said quietly. "I'm fine." Rebecca's smile tightened. She moved on. The plane touched down with a jolt, the cabin filled with the rustle of passengers gathering their things, pulling bags from overhead bins, checking their phones. Ava stayed seated, waiting for the rush to thin out. She pulled out her phone and opened her messages. One from her dad. "Dad, wheels down yet? I'm sending Brian to pick you up. Can't wait to see you, baby girl." Brian was her father's driver, a kind, soft-spoken man in his 50s who always had peppermints in his pocket and asked about her design projects like he actually cared. Ava typed back. "Ava, just landed. See you soon." She hesitated, then opened a new message thread. This one to Zara. "Ava, something happened on the flight. I'll tell you later, but I need to talk to someone about it. Zara. You okay?" Ava, "Yeah, I'm fine, just pissed." Zara, "Say less. Come over tomorrow." Wine plus rage equals therapy. Ava managed a small smile and pocketed her phone. She stood, grabbed her carry-on from the overhead bin, and made her way toward the exit. As she passed through the jet bridge, she caught a glimpse of Rebecca near the cockpit, chatting with another flight attendant, laughing about something. Ava kept walking. JFK was chaos at 6 in the morning, fluorescent lights, crowds of bleary-eyed travelers dragging suitcases, the smell of burnt coffee and cinnamon rolls. Ava moved through it all on autopilot, her mind still replaying the flight. She made it through customs, collected her checked luggage, and stepped out into the arrivals hall. And there he was, Brian. tall, broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and a gray beard. He was holding a sign that said Reeves in neat block letters, because even though he knew exactly what Ava looked like, he was old school like that. "Miss Ava!" he called out, his face lighting up. "Welcome home!" Ava's chest loosened just a little. She walked over and let him pull her into a brief, fatherly hug. "Good to see you, Brian," she said, her voice softer now. "Your father's been counting down the days," Brian said, taking her suitcase. "Practically wore a path in the carpet pacing around the house." Ava laughed despite herself. "Sounds about right." They made their way out to the curb, where a sleek black SUV was waiting. Brian loaded her luggage into the trunk, then opened the back door for her. Ava slid in, sank into the leather seat, and closed her eyes. Home. She was almost home. The drive into Manhattan was quiet. Brian didn't push her to talk, and Ava was grateful for that. She watched the city wake up through the tinted windows, the skyline sharp against the pale morning sky, the streets already filling with taxis and delivery trucks, the bodega owners rolling up their metal gates. New York, loud, relentless, beautiful. She'd missed it. By the time they pulled up to the Kingston estate in the Upper East Side, the sun had fully risen. The house was a limestone mansion, tucked behind iron gates and manicured hedges, elegant, imposing, but somehow still warm. Ava had grown up here, climbed those trees, scraped her knees on that driveway, built pillow forts in that living room. Brian parked and came around to open her door. "Your father's inside," he said with a wink, probably wearing a hole in the floor by now. Ava smiled, grabbed her bag, and headed up the steps. The front door swung open before she could reach it, and there he was, Donovan Kingston, 6'3", broad shoulders, dark skin that glowed with health and the kind of confidence that came from building an empire from nothing. His hair was cropped short, flecked with gray at the temples. He was wearing a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and dark slacks, casual for him, which meant he'd been waiting for her instead of heading to the office. His face broke into a wide, warm smile. "There's my girl." Ava dropped her bag and walked straight into his arms. He held her tight, the way he always did, like she was still 7 years old and the world couldn't touch her as long as he was there. "Missed you, baby girl," he murmured into her hair. "Missed you too, Dad," she whispered back. For a moment. Everything else fell away, the flight, Rebecca, the humiliation. None of it mattered, because she was home. But as they pulled apart and Donovan looked at her, really looked at her, the way only a father could, his smile faltered. "You okay?" he asked, his voice lower now, careful. Ava hesitated. She could tell him, right now. Tell him what happened. Tell him about Rebecca Miles and the way she'd spoken to her, the way she'd been denied a meal she'd paid for, the way the other passengers had watched and done nothing. She could tell him, and he would handle it, immediately, decisively. But that wasn't what she wanted, not yet. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Donovan studied her for a beat longer, then nodded slowly. "All right, but you know where I am if you need me." "I know." He squeezed her shoulder, then stepped aside to let her in. The house smelled like home, like her mother's cooking, jollof rice simmering on the stove, plantains frying in the kitchen, like fresh flowers in the foyer, like the faint scent of her father's cologne lingering in the hallway. "Mom!" Ava called out. "In the kitchen, baby!" Ava dropped her bag by the stairs and headed toward the back of the house. The kitchen was huge, all marble countertops and stainless steel appliances, but it felt cozy somehow. Her mother, Simone Kingston, was at the stove, stirring a pot with one hand and scrolling through her phone with the other. Simone was elegant in a way that seemed effortless. 52 years old and still stunning, with high cheekbones, warm brown skin, and natural hair styled in soft locks that fell past her shoulders. She was wearing a simple linen dress and bare feet, and somehow she still looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. She looked up when Ava walked in, and her whole face lit up. "There she is!" Ava crossed the kitchen and hugged her mother tight. "Missed you, Mama." "Missed you more," Simone said, pulling back to look at her daughter. "You hungry? I made your favorite." "I can smell," Ava said with a grin. "You didn't have to do all this." "Yes, I did. My baby's been gone for 6 months. That calls for jollof and plantains. And puff-puff. And maybe some pepper soup if you're good." Ava laughed. "You're the best." "I know." Simone winked, then turned back to the stove. "Your brother's still asleep, but he'll be down soon. He's been talking about you nonstop." Ava smiled. Isaiah, her little brother, 15 years old, gangly and brilliant and obsessed with coding and drones and anything that involved taking things apart and putting them back together. She loved him fiercely. "Can't wait to see him," Ava said. Simone glanced over her shoulder. "You sure you're okay, baby? You look tired." There it was again. That look, that knowing. Her mother always knew. Ava opened her mouth to brush it off, to say she was fine, to keep the lie going just a little longer. But instead, she said, "Something happened on the flight." Simone turned off the stove and turned around, her full attention on Ava now. "What happened?" Ava took a breath and told her everything. So now both parents know something's wrong. But Ava hasn't told her father the full story yet. How do you think Donovan will react when he finds out? Drop your thoughts below, and if you're hooked, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, it's about to get intense. Simone Kingston didn't interrupt. She stood there, leaning against the counter with her arms folded, her face perfectly still as Ava recounted every detail. The pre-ordered meal, Rebecca's smirk, the words, "I don't know how you got up here," the looks from the other passengers, the laughter. When Ava finished, the kitchen was silent except for the faint bubbling of the rice on the stove. Simone's jaw was tight. "You recorded it?" she asked quietly. Ava nodded. "Every word." "Good." Simone's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Show me." Ava pulled out her phone, opened the video, and handed it over. Simone watched in silence, her expression unreadable. But Ava knew her mother well enough to see the fury simmering just beneath the surface. The slight flare of her nostrils, the way her grip tightened on the phone, the muscle twitching in her jaw. When the video ended, Simone handed the phone back. "That woman needs to be fired," she said flatly. "I know. And your father needs to know about this." Ava hesitated. "I don't want him to just bulldoze through this, Mom. You know how he gets." Simone's expression softened slightly. "Baby, I know you want to handle this your way, but this isn't just about you. This is about his company, his airline. If an employee is treating passengers like this, especially a black woman in first class, that's a problem he needs to know about." "I know," Ava said again, quieter this time. I need to think about how I want to do this." Simone studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but don't sit on it too long. The longer you wait, the more people like Rebecca Miles get away with." Ava's chest tightened. "I won't." Simone reached out and cupped Ava's face in her hands. "I'm proud of you, you know that? For staying calm, for recording it, for not letting her break you." Ava's throat went tight. "Thanks, Mama. Now go get some rest. We'll figure this out together." Ava didn't rest. She went upstairs to her old bedroom, still exactly the way she'd left it, down to the sketches pinned to the corkboard above her desk and the stack of fashion magazines on her nightstand, and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone. The video was still there, waiting. She played it again. Watched herself ask politely for her meal. Watched Rebecca's face shift from fake politeness to cold dismissal. Heard the words again. "I don't know how you got up here, but don't make a scene." Ava's hands curled into fists. She opened her laptop and navigated to Nova Air's website, clicked on the Customer Service tab, found the complaints form, and then she stopped. If she filed this complaint as Ava Kingston, it would go straight to her father's desk. Or worse, to the PR team, who would handle it quietly, internally, and Rebecca Miles would get a slap on the wrist at best. But if she filed it as Ava Reeves, if she filed it anonymously, like any other passenger, she could see how Nova Air really handled discrimination complaints when no one important was watching. Ava's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she started typing. Nova Air Customer Complaint Form. Name, Ava Reeves. Flight, number 447. Date, previous day's date. Route, London. Heathrow, LHR, to New York, JFK. Seat, 2A, first class. Nature of complaint. I am writing to formally report an incident of discrimination that occurred on Flight 447. I am a 23-year-old black woman who was denied service by flight attendant Rebecca Miles despite having a valid first-class ticket and a pre-ordered meal. When I politely requested my meal, Ms. Miles told me it was for premium passengers only. When I showed her my boarding pass, she leaned in and said, "I don't know how you got up here, but don't make a scene." I have video evidence of this interaction, which I am attaching to this complaint. I am requesting a full investigation into Ms. Miles's conduct and a formal apology from Nova Air. This is not the standard of service I expected from an airline that claims to value all passengers equally. Attached? Video file. Ava read it over twice, then hit submit. The screen refreshed. Thank you for your feedback. A representative will respond within 5 to 7 business days. Ava closed her laptop and leaned back against her pillows. Now she waited. 5 days passed. Ava tried to settle back into her life in New York. She had coffee with Zara, who listened to the whole story with her mouth hanging open, and then spent 20 minutes ranting about entitled Karens on power trips. She spent time with Isaiah, who showed her the drone he'd built and nearly crashed it into their mother's prized orchids. She sketched. She scrolled through job postings. She avoided her father's questions about what she wanted to do next. But mostly, she checked her email. Every morning, every afternoon, every night before bed. Nothing. On the 6th day, an email finally arrived. Subject, Customer Complaint, Flight 447. Ava's heart jumped. She opened it immediately. Dear Ms. Reeves, thank you for taking the time to share your feedback regarding your recent experience on Flight 447. At Nova Air, we are committed to providing exceptional service to all of our passengers, and we sincerely regret that your experience did not meet your expectations. We have reviewed your complaint and have taken appropriate internal action to address the matter. Please be assured that we take all feedback seriously and are continuously working to improve our customer service standards. As a gesture of goodwill, we would like to offer you a $200 travel voucher for future flights with Nova Air. We hope to have the opportunity to serve you again soon. Sincerely, Nova Air Customer Relations Team. Ava read it once, then twice, then a third time, just to make sure she wasn't missing something. Appropriate internal action. That was it. That was all they said. No specifics, no acknowledgement of what Rebecca had actually done. No mention of discrimination or an investigation, just corporate speak and a voucher. $200. Like that was supposed to make it okay. Ava's hands shook as she set her phone down. She stood up, paced across her room, then picked up her phone again and called Zara. Hey babe, what's... They sent me a fucking voucher, Ava said, her voice tight. What? Nova Air. I filed the complaint anonymously. They responded with a generic apology and a $200 voucher. No investigation. No accountability, nothing. Zara was silent for a beat. Then, are you kidding me? I wish I was. Ava, you have to tell your dad. Like, now. Ava sank onto the edge of her bed, her free hand pressed to her forehead. I know. No, I'm serious. This is exactly the kind of thing he needs to know about. If they're treating you like this, someone who had every right to be in that seat, imagine how they're treating other black passengers who don't have a billionaire father to back them up. Ava closed her eyes. I know, Z, I wanted to see how they'd handle it. And now I know. They didn't handle it. They buried it. Exactly. Zara exhaled sharply. So what are you going to do? Ava opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. I'm going to make sure they can't bury it anymore. That night, over dinner, Ava told her father everything. They were sitting in the dining room, just the four of them, the way they always did when Ava was home. Simone had made her famous jollof rice, and Isaiah was talking a mile a minute about some coding competition he'd entered, barely pausing to breathe. Donovan was listening with that quiet, patient smile he always had when his kids were talking. And then Ava said, "Dad, I need to tell you something." The table went quiet. Donovan set down his fork and looked at her. "What's wrong?" Ava took a breath and told him everything. Rebecca Miles, the meal, the humiliation, the video, the complaint she'd filed anonymously, the response she'd gotten. As she spoke, she watched her father's face change. The warmth drained out of it, replaced by something cold and sharp. His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists on the table, but he didn't interrupt. He let her finish. When she was done, the silence in the room was deafening. Isaiah stared at his plate, his usual energy completely gone. Simone reached over and squeezed Ava's hand. "And Donovan." Donovan stood up. He walked to the window, his back to the table, his hands clasped behind him. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then, quietly, "Show me the video." Ava pulled out her phone, opened the file, and handed it to him. Donovan watched in silence. His expression didn't change, but Ava could see the muscle twitching in his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. When it ended, he handed the phone back. "I'm sorry, baby girl," he said, his voice low and rough. "I'm sorry that happened to you." "It's not your fault, Dad. It is my fault." He turned to face her, and his eyes were blazing. "That woman works for me. She wears a uniform with my company's name on it, and she treated my daughter. She treated you like you were nothing." "Dad?" "No." His voice was firm now, controlled, but there was no mistaking the fury underneath. "This ends. Now." Ava stood up. "I don't want you to just fire her and sweep this under the rug." Donovan's eyebrows rose. "What do you want?" Ava met his gaze. "I want everyone to know what she did. I want Nova Air to prove that it actually cares about this. Not just in a press release or a mission statement, but in real action. I want this to mean something." Donovan studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. "All right," he said. "Then let's do this your way." 2 days later, Ava sat in her father's office at Nova Air headquarters. The building was sleek, modern, all glass and steel and panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline. Donovan's office took up the entire top floor, massive, impeccably designed, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made you feel like you were floating above the city. Ava had been here 100 times growing up, but today felt different. Today, she wasn't just Donovan Kingston's daughter. Today, she was here to change something. Donovan sat across from her, his hands steepled, his expression calm but focused. "All right," he said. "Walk me through it. What's your plan?" Ava leaned forward. "The annual leadership conference is in 2 weeks, right?" "Right. You always use it to announce new initiatives, new routes, new partnerships, new programs." "Right. So this year you announce a new customer integrity and equality initiative, something that holds employees accountable for how they treat passengers, diversity training, anonymous complaint reviews, real consequences for discrimination." Donovan nodded slowly. "I like it, but that's not enough, is it?" Ava's lips curved into a small, determined smile. "No, it's not." She pulled out her phone, opened the video, and set it on the desk between them. "You invite Rebecca Miles to the conference," she said. "Tell her she's being recognized for her years of service. Have her there, in the room, with all the other employees and the press." Donovan's eyes narrowed. "And then?" "And then you play this." For a moment, Donovan just stared at her. Then he leaned back in his chair and laughed, a low, incredulous laugh that filled the room. "You want to publicly expose her," he said. "I want to publicly expose the problem," Ava corrected. "Rebecca's just the example. But if we do this right, it sends a message to every employee at Nova Air. We're watching, we're listening, and we won't tolerate this." Donovan studied her, his expression shifting from amusement to something deeper, pride. "You're brilliant, you know that?" he said quietly. Ava shrugged. "I learned from the best." He smiled, then picked up his phone and made a call. "Michael, it's Donovan. I need you to put together a last-minute addition to the leadership conference agenda, and I need you to send a special invitation to one of our flight attendants, Rebecca Miles." He paused, listening. "Yes, that's right. Tell her she's being honored for her service, VIP treatment. I want her front and center." Another pause. "Perfect. Thanks. Michael?" He hung up and looked at Ava. "It's done." Ava exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. This was really happening. The trap is set. Rebecca Miles has no idea what's coming. But here's the question. Is public humiliation the right way to handle this, or should there be another approach? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from you. And if you're invested in Ava's story, go ahead and hit that like button. Let's keep this energy going. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation, anticipation, and doubt. Ava threw herself into the planning. She worked with her father's team to draft the framework for the Customer Integrity and Equality Initiative. Not just a flashy announcement, but a real, actionable program. Anonymous complaint hotlines, mandatory bias training for all customer-facing staff, third-party audits of service interactions, consequences that actually meant something. She met with Nova Air's head of HR, a sharp woman named Patricia Hughes, who listened to Ava's ideas with keen interest and took notes like her life depended on it. "This is good," Patricia had said, tapping her pen against her legal pad. "This is really good. But you know there's going to be pushback, right? From the union, from middle management, from employees who think we're overreacting." "Let them push back," Ava had said. "If they're that worried about being held accountable, maybe they're part of the problem." Patricia had smiled at that. "I like you." But as the conference drew closer, Ava's confidence started to crack. Late at night, lying in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, the doubts crept in. What if this backfires? What if people think you're being vindictive? What if Rebecca Miles sues? What if this hurts your father's company more than it helps? She'd roll over, grab her phone, and watch the video again, listen to Rebecca's voice, see the look on her own face, the quiet humiliation, the forced composure. And then she'd remember why she was doing this, not for revenge, for every person who'd ever been made to feel small in a space they'd paid to occupy. 10 days before the conference, Ava met Zara for brunch at a cafe in Soho. Zara was already there when Ava arrived, sitting at a corner table with an iced oat milk latte and her phone in hand. She looked up when Ava walked in, and her face lit up. "There she is, my favorite revolutionary." Ava laughed despite herself and slid into the seat across from her. "I'm not a revolutionary." "Girl, you're about to take down a racist flight attendant on live TV. That's revolutionary energy." Zara leaned forward, her eyes sparkling. "So, how are you feeling? Nervous? Excited? Ready to watch the world burn?" "All of the above," Ava admitted. She ordered a cappuccino from the waiter, then turned back to Zara. "I keep second-guessing myself. Like, is this too much? Am I going too far?" Zara's expression sobered. "Do you think Rebecca Miles thought she was going too far when she humiliated you in front of a whole cabin?" "No." "Exactly. She didn't think twice about it. She probably went home that night, had a glass of wine, and forgot all about you." Zara reached across the table and squeezed Ava's hand. "You're not going too far. You're holding someone accountable. There's a difference." Ava exhaled slowly. "I just don't want people to think I'm doing this because I'm Donovan Kingston's daughter. Like I'm flexing my privilege or whatever." "Ava," Zara's voice was firm now, "you are Donovan Kingston's daughter. And yeah, that gives you access and power that most people don't have. But you're using that power to shine a light on something that happens to people who don't have that privilege. That's not flexing. That's using your platform." Ava looked down at her hands. "I hope you're right." "I'm always right," Zara said with a grin. "Now drink your overpriced coffee and tell me what you're wearing to this thing, because if you're going to take someone down, you need to look fierce while doing it." 5 days before the conference, Donovan called Ava into his office. She found him standing at the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city below. He didn't turn when she walked in. "You okay, Dad?" Ava asked, closing the door behind her. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "About? About whether we're doing the right thing." Ava's stomach dropped. "You're having second thoughts?" Donovan turned to face her. His expression was serious, thoughtful. Not about holding Rebecca accountable. She deserves everything that's coming to her. But about the way we're doing it, publicly, in front of the press. Ava crossed her arms. "You think it's too harsh." "I think it's powerful," Donovan corrected. "And power can cut both ways. If we do this, there's no going back. Rebecca Miles's life is going to change forever. Her career is over. Her reputation is destroyed. And yeah, she brought it on herself. But once we press that button, we can't unpress it." Ava walked over to stand beside him at the window. For a moment, they both just looked out at the skyline, the sprawling city, the endless grid of buildings and lives and stories. "Do you remember what you told me when I was 7? Ava asked. "When that guy tried to cheat you out of millions?" Donovan's lips quirked. "Clean out your desk?" "No, after. At dinner. You said people who need to shout are afraid no one's listening. But when you know your voice matters, you can whisper, and the whole room will lean in." Donovan nodded slowly. "I remember." "This isn't shouting, Dad. This is making sure people have to listen. Because if we don't do this, if we just fire Rebecca quietly and put out a press release about diversity training, nothing changes. It's just noise. But if we show people what actually happened, if we make it real and undeniable, then maybe it means something." Donovan studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. That same proud, slightly awed smile he'd had when she'd first pitched the idea. "When did you get so wise?" he asked. "I told you. I learned from the best." He pulled her into a hug. "All right. We do this. Your way. No second guessing." "No second guessing," Ava agreed. 3 days before the conference, Rebecca Miles received her invitation. It arrived via email, sent from Nova Air's events coordination team with the subject line, "Special Recognition, Annual Leadership Conference." Rebecca had been working for Nova Air for 15 years. She'd received Employee of the Month awards, commendations for customer service, and a perfect attendance record. But she'd never been invited to the leadership conference before. That was for executives, high performers, and VIPs. So when she opened the email and read that she was being honored for her dedication and exemplary service, she nearly dropped her phone. Exemplary service. She read it 3 times to make sure it was real. Then she called her best friend Diane, who also worked as a flight attendant. "You will not believe what just happened," Rebecca said, barely able to contain her excitement. "What?" "I'm being recognized at the leadership conference. They're honoring me, Di, in front of everyone." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "Wait, seriously?" "Seriously. The email says they want to highlight employees who embody Nova Air's values. I guess someone finally noticed all the work I've been putting in." Diane laughed. "Well, damn. Congratulations, Beck. You deserve it." "I know, right? I've been busting my ass for years. It's about time." "So what are you going to wear?" Rebecca grinned. "I'm thinking that navy dress I wore to Sarah's wedding, the one with the lace sleeves, classy but professional." "Perfect. You're going to kill it." Rebecca hung up and stared at the email again, a smile spreading across her face. Finally, she was being recognized. She didn't notice the name at the bottom of the email signature. Michael Torres, Executive Assistant to CEO Donovan Kingston. She didn't think twice about why the CEO's office would be involved in recognizing a flight attendant. She just thought she'd earned it. 2 days before the conference, Ava had a breakdown. It happened late at night in her bedroom while she was going over her speech for the 100th time. She'd been working on it for days, trying to find the right balance between personal and professional, between anger and composure, between calling out the problem and offering a solution. But every draft felt wrong, too preachy, too soft, too angry, too detached. She crumpled up the latest version and threw it across the room. "Ugh," she groaned, dropping her head into her hands. There was a soft knock on her door. "Ava?" It was her mother's voice. "Come in," Ava said, not lifting her head. Simone entered, closed the door behind her, and sat down on the edge of the bed. She didn't say anything at first, just placed a hand on Ava's back and waited. Finally, Ava looked up. Her eyes were red. "I don't know if I can do this, Mom." "Yes, you can." "What if I mess it up? What if I get up there and freeze? What if I say the wrong thing and it all backfires?" Simone took Ava's face in her hands, the way she used to when Ava was little and had a nightmare. "Baby, listen to me. You are not just Donovan Kingston's daughter. You are Ava Kingston. You are smart and strong, and you have every right to stand up there and speak your truth. Not because of who your father is, but because of what happened to you. And if you get up there and freeze, if you stumble over your words, that's okay, because you're human, and people will see that. They'll see you being real, being vulnerable, and that's more powerful than any perfect speech." Ava's throat tightened. "I'm scared." "I know, but you're brave too, and those two things can exist at the same time." Ava leaned into her mother's embrace and let herself cry, just for a moment. Just long enough to let the fear out. Then she pulled back, wiped her eyes, and nodded. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I can do this. I know you can." The night before the conference, Ava barely slept. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through everything in her mind: the video, the speech, the moment when Rebecca Miles would realize what was happening. At 3 a.m., she got up, went to her desk, and opened her laptop. She pulled up the speech one last time, and then, instead of editing it, she closed the document. She didn't need a script. She just needed to tell the truth. The morning of the conference, Ava woke to sunlight streaming through her window and a text from her father. "Dad, today's the day, baby girl. I'm proud of you, no matter what happens." Ava smiled and typed back, "Ava, thanks, Dad. Let's do this." She got up, showered, and stood in front of her closet for a long time. Finally, she pulled out a sleek black dress, elegant, simple, powerful. The kind of dress that said, "I belong here," without shouting. She styled her curls, put on minimal makeup, and slipped on a pair of heels. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like someone who could change the world, or at least change one airline. The leadership conference was held at the Grand Marquis Hotel in Midtown, a sprawling, luxurious venue with crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and ballrooms big enough to hold 500 people. When Ava arrived with her father, the place was already buzzing. Employees in suits and cocktail dresses mingled in the lobby, photographers snapped pictures, reporters from industry publications hovered near the entrance, hoping for quotes. Donovan placed a hand on Ava's shoulder. "You ready?" Ava took a deep breath. "Yeah, I'm ready." They walked in together, and somewhere across the room, Rebecca Miles, dressed in her navy lace dress, hair perfectly styled, smile bright and confident, had no idea her world was about to end. The stage is set, the players are in position, and in just a few hours, everything changes. What do you think is going to happen when that video plays? Drop your predictions in the comments, and if you're on the edge of your seat right now, smash that subscribe button, because this is where everything explodes. The Grand Marquis Ballroom was a study in corporate elegance. Round tables draped in white linen filled the space, each one set with crystal glasses and fresh flower centerpieces. A massive stage dominated the front of the room, flanked by twin projection screens and a podium with the Nova Air logo gleaming in polished chrome. Soft classical music played through hidden speakers, barely audible over the hum of conversation. 500 people filled the room, Nova Air executives in tailored suits, department heads comparing notes, mid-level managers networking over glasses of champagne, flight attendants and ground crew members who'd been selected for recognition, dressed in their finest, basking in the rare spotlight. And at table 12, near the center of the room, Rebecca Miles sat with her colleagues, feeling like she'd finally arrived. She'd greeted everyone she passed on the way in, her smile bright and confident. She'd posed for a photo with the HR director. She'd even exchanged pleasantries with a VP whose name she couldn't quite remember, but whose approval she'd always craved. "Can you believe we're here?" whispered Diane, who'd been invited as Rebecca's +1. "I know, right?" Rebecca said, adjusting the lace sleeve of her dress. I keep waiting for someone to tell me it's a mistake. It's not a mistake, Beck. You earned this. Rebecca smiled and took a sip of her champagne. She had no idea that 3 tables away, Ava Kingston was watching her. Ava sat at a VIP table near the front, flanked by her father on one side and Patricia Hughes, the head of HR, on the other. Her mother and Isaiah were seated nearby, both dressed impeccably, both projecting the kind of quiet confidence that came from being Kingstons. But Ava's hands were trembling under the table. She pressed them against her thighs, willing herself to stay calm. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure people could hear it. Her mouth was dry. Her mind kept racing through everything that could go wrong. What if the video doesn't play? What if people think I'm being petty? What if Rebecca walks out before we finish? Her father leaned over and spoke quietly. "You okay?" Ava nodded, not trusting her voice. Donovan placed a hand over hers and squeezed gently. "You've got this." She looked at him, at the man who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd faced down corporate sharks and economic downturns and never flinched, and drew strength from his presence. "I've got this," she whispered back. At exactly 10 a.m., the lights dimmed. The chatter in the room died down. People found their seats. Waiters slipped out through side doors. A spotlight hit the stage, and Donovan Kingston walked up to the podium. The applause was immediate and thunderous. 500 people rose to their feet, clapping, whistling, some even cheering. Donovan was a legend in the aviation industry, a man who'd started Nova Air with 2 planes and a dream and turned it into a global powerhouse. He waited for the applause to die down, then smiled that warm, disarming smile that had won over investors, politicians, and passengers alike. "Good morning," he said, his deep voice carrying effortlessly through the room. "Thank you all for being here, and thank you for another incredible year at Nova Air. More applause. Today, we're here to celebrate excellence, to recognize the people who make this company what it is, to honor the employees who go above and beyond to deliver world-class service to our passengers every single day." Rebecca sat up a little straighter, her heart racing. "This is it. This is my moment." "But before we get to the individual recognitions," Donovan continued, "I want to talk about something that's been on my mind a lot lately, something that's at the core of who we are as a company." The room went quiet, attentive. "Culture," Donovan said. "Not the culture we say we have in our mission statements and marketing materials, the culture we actually have, the one that shows up in how we treat each other, how we treat our passengers, how we handle moments when no one's watching." He paused, letting the words settle. "Because here's the truth. A company is only as good as its people. And if our people aren't treating every passenger with dignity and respect, regardless of race, gender, background, or how much they paid for their ticket, then we're failing, not just as a business, but as human beings." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some people nodded, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Rebecca frowned slightly. This wasn't what she'd expected. This was supposed to be a celebration, not a lecture. "So today," Donovan said, "we're launching a new initiative, the Customer Integrity and Equality Initiative, a program designed to ensure that every passenger who flies with Nova Air is treated with the respect they deserve. No exceptions." Polite applause. "But launching a program isn't enough," Donovan continued, his tone sharpening. "We need to understand why it's necessary. We need to see the problem for what it is. And sometimes the best way to do that is to look at a real example." The projection screens on either side of the stage flickered to life. Rebecca's frown deepened. "A few weeks ago," Donovan said, "one of our passengers filed a formal complaint. She was flying first class on Flight 447 from London to New York. She had a valid ticket. She'd pre-ordered her meal, and when she politely asked for that meal, she was denied service. Not because the meal wasn't available, but because the flight attendant didn't believe she belonged in first class." The room went dead silent. Rebecca's stomach dropped. "No, no, no, no." "The passenger recorded the interaction," Donovan said, "and with her permission, I'd like to share it with you now." The screens went black, and then the video began to play. The sound quality was crystal clear. Ava's voice, polite and soft. "Hi, I'd like to get my meal, please. I pre-ordered the salmon." Rebecca's voice, cold and dismissive. "That's for premium passengers only." Ava, "I am a premium passenger. I'm in first class." Rebecca, "Let me check your ticket." A pause, the rustle of movement, and then Rebecca's voice again, low and venomous. "I don't know how you got up here, but don't make a scene." The video ended. The screens went black. The room was silent. 500 people sat frozen, staring at the stage. And Rebecca Miles felt like the floor had just opened up beneath her. Her face drained of color. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. "That's my voice. That's me. Oh, God. Oh, God. That's me." Diane leaned over, her face pale. "Beck, that was you?" Rebecca couldn't speak. She just sat there, paralyzed, as the weight of what was happening crashed down on her. Everyone knew. Everyone had just heard her. She looked around wildly, hoping, praying that maybe people didn't know it was her. Maybe they couldn't see her face in the video. Maybe... But then Donovan spoke again. "The flight attendant in that video is Rebecca Miles." Rebecca's blood turned to ice. She's been with Nova Air for 15 years, and up until a few weeks ago, she had an exemplary record. "No, please, stop." "Rebecca," Donovan said, his voice calm but firm, "I'd like to invite you to join me on stage." The spotlight swung across the room and landed directly on Rebecca. The entire ballroom turned to look at her, 500 pairs of eyes. Rebecca couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "Rebecca," Donovan said again, "please come up." "Run," her mind screamed. "Get up and run." But her legs wouldn't work. Diane touched her arm. "Beck, I didn't," Rebecca whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean..." But the words died in her throat. 2 security guards appeared at the sides of the ballroom, moving toward her table. Rebecca's heart hammered. She looked at Donovan, at the stage, at the screens still glowing with the frozen image of the video, and then she looked to her left and saw her. Ava Kingston, sitting 3 tables away, dressed in a sleek black dress, hair styled, makeup subtle, looking every inch like the woman she was, confident, composed, untouchable. And she was staring directly at Rebecca. Their eyes met. And in that moment, Rebecca understood. She's his daughter. Oh my God, she's Donovan Kingston's daughter. The realization hit like a freight train. The girl from the flight, the one she'd dismissed, the one she'd humiliated. She wasn't just some random passenger, she was Ava Kingston, and Rebecca had just destroyed her own life. The security guards reached her table. "Miss Miles," one of them said quietly, "please come with us." Rebecca's legs finally obeyed. She stood, shaking, her face burning with shame and fear and rage. The room watched in silence as she was escorted toward the side exit. But before she reached the door, Donovan's voice stopped her. "Actually, Rebecca, there's someone who'd like to say a few words first." Rebecca turned, her vision blurring with tears, and watched as Ava Kingston stood up and walked toward the stage. The room erupted in whispers. "Who is that? Is that his daughter? I heard she's been working in London. She's the one from the video?" Ava climbed the steps to the stage, her heels clicking softly against the polished wood. She stood beside her father, and for a moment she just looked out at the crowd. 500 people, cameras, reporters, and Rebecca Miles, frozen near the exit, her face streaked with tears. Ava took the microphone from her father and began to speak. "My name is Ava Kingston," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "And I was the passenger in that video." The whispers stopped. "I want to be very clear about something," Ava continued. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm not here to humiliate anyone. I'm here because what happened to me on that flight happens to people every single day, and most of the time, no one does anything about it." She paused, letting her words settle. "When I filed a complaint, anonymously, as Ava Reeves, I wanted to see how Nova Air would handle it. I wanted to see if the company my father built would actually live up to its values. And you know what I got? A generic apology email and a $200 voucher. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. $200, Ava repeated. That's what my dignity was worth. That's what the company thought would make it okay. She looked at Rebecca, who was now openly sobbing. Rebecca, I don't hate you, Ava said softly. I don't even know you, but what you did was wrong. And the fact that you thought you could get away with it, the fact that you probably have gotten away with it before, that's the problem. She turned back to the audience. When a company grows, its greatest challenge isn't competition, it's culture. Diversity can't just live in a handbook. It has to breathe in every flight, every crew, every customer experience. And if leaders don't check the hearts and minds of their employees often enough, the company stops thriving. Not because of bad service, but because of silence. The room was utterly still. So today, Ava said, her voice stronger now, we're breaking that silence. We're launching the Customer Integrity and Equality Initiative, and I'm going to be leading it. Not because I'm Donovan Kingston's daughter, but because I know what it feels like to be treated like you don't belong, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. The silence held for one more beat, and then the applause began, slow at first, then building, then thunderous. 500 people rose to their feet, clapping, some with tears in their eyes, some shaking their heads in disbelief, and Rebecca Miles was escorted out of the room, her career, her life as she knew it, over. The truth is out. The power has shifted. But this is only the beginning. What do you think happens next? Is justice served, or is there more to this story? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because what happened next is going to take this to a whole new level. The aftermath of the conference was a wildfire. Within hours, the video had been leaked, or rather strategically released, to major news outlets. By evening, it was trending on every social media platform. Hashtag Nova Air. Ava Kingston. Accountability matters. The story had everything. Wealth, race, injustice, and a billionaire's daughter taking a public stand. The think pieces started rolling in almost immediately. Billionaire heiress exposes discrimination on family's airline. Nova Air flight attendant fired after racist incident goes viral. Ava Kingston, the face of corporate accountability or privilege. That last headline made Ava's stomach turn. She was sitting in her father's office at Nova Air headquarters, scrolling through her phone, watching the story spiral in real time. The support was overwhelming. Thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of discrimination, praising her courage, calling her an inspiration. But the criticism was just as loud. Easy to be brave when your daddy owns the company. She only cared because it happened to her. What about everyone else? This is performative. She's using her privilege to get revenge, not create change. Rebecca Miles lost her job and her reputation. Where's the compassion? Where's the forgiveness? Ava set her phone down and pressed her palms against her eyes. Don't read the comments, her father said from across the desk. He was leaning back in his chair, watching her with a mixture of concern and pride. Too late, Ava muttered. Baby girl, you did the right thing. You know that, right? Do I? Ava looked up at him. Half the internet thinks I'm a hero. The other half thinks I'm a spoiled rich girl who ruined someone's life for fun. That's the internet. It's designed to polarize. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and you know what the truth is. Ava exhaled slowly. I didn't think it would blow up like this. You exposed discrimination at one of the biggest airlines in the world. Of course it was going to blow up. Donovan leaned forward, his expression serious. But the question is, are you ready for what comes next? What do you mean? This isn't over, Ava. Rebecca Miles is going to lawyer up. The media is going to keep digging. There are going to be interviews, statements, probably a lawsuit, and you're going to be at the center of all of it. Ava felt a cold weight settle in her chest. I can handle it. I know you can, but I need you to be honest with me. Are you doing this because you believe in it, or are you doing it to prove something? Both, Ava admitted. Is that wrong? Donovan's expression softened. No, it's human. Just don't lose yourself in the noise. 3 days after the conference, Ava's phone rang at 7 a.m. She groaned, rolled over, and squinted at the screen. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello? Is this Ava Kingston?" A woman's voice, professional, clipped. "Who's asking?" "My name is Jennifer Ortiz. I'm an attorney representing Rebecca Miles." Ava sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. "Okay." "Ms. Miles would like to schedule a meeting with you. She'd like to apologize in person and discuss the possibility of a public statement that might help repair some of the damage to her reputation." Ava's jaw tightened. "She wants me to help her save face? She wants to apologize," Jennifer said evenly. "What you choose to do with that apology is up to you. But I think it would be in everyone's best interest to have a conversation before this escalates further." "Escalates? You mean before she sues me?" There was a pause on the other end. "Ms. Miles hasn't made any decisions about legal action yet, but she is exploring her options." Ava's blood ran cold. "She humiliated me. She treated me like I didn't belong, and now she's threatening to sue?" "She's not threatening anything. She's asking for a conversation." "Tell her I'll think about it," Ava said, her voice tight. "Miss Kingston?" Ava hung up. She sat there for a moment, staring at her phone, her heart pounding. Then she called her father. "She wants to meet?" Donovan said, his tone incredulous. They were back in his office, along with Patricia Hughes and Nova Air's head legal counsel, a sharp-eyed man named David Brennan. "That's what her lawyer said," Ava confirmed. "She wants to apologize and discuss a public statement." David leaned forward. "Translation. She wants you to say something that makes her look less like a villain so she can salvage what's left of her career." "And if I don't?" Ava asked. "Then she'll probably sue," David said bluntly. "For defamation, emotional distress, wrongful termination. Take your pick. She won't win, but she'll drag this out and make it uglier than it needs to be." Ava's stomach twisted. "So I'm supposed to just let her off the hook?" "No," Patricia said firmly. "You're supposed to decide what your goal is here. Do you want justice, or do you want revenge? Because those are two very different things." Ava looked at her father. "What do you think I should do?" Donovan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think you should meet with her." Ava blinked. "What?" "Not because she deserves it, but because you need to look her in the eye and decide for yourself whether this is someone who's genuinely remorseful or someone who's just trying to save herself. You can't make that call from a distance." Ava chewed her lip. "And if she's not remorseful?" "Then you walk away, and we let the lawyers handle the rest." The meeting was set for 2 days later at a neutral location, a private conference room at a boutique hotel in Midtown. Ava arrived with her father and David Brennan. Rebecca arrived with Jennifer Ortiz and another lawyer whose name Ava immediately forgot. They sat on opposite sides of a long table, the air between them thick with tension. Rebecca looked awful. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, her skin pale, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing a plain sweater and jeans, a far cry from the polished, confident woman Ava had seen at the conference. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Rebecca cleared her throat. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Ava didn't respond. She just waited. Rebecca glanced at her lawyer, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked back at Ava. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry for what I said to you on that flight. I was wrong. I was unprofessional. I let my own biases cloud my judgment, and I treated you in a way that was completely unacceptable." Ava's expression didn't change. "Why?" Rebecca blinked. "Why what? Why did you treat me that way? What made you look at me and decide I didn't belong?" Rebecca's face crumpled. "I don't know. I just... You weren't dressed like the other first-class passengers, and I made assumptions, and You saw a black girl in a hoodie and decided she must have snuck into first class," Ava said flatly. Rebecca flinched. "I didn't think of it like that. But that's what it was, wasn't it?" Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't know. Maybe. I'm not a racist. I don't think of myself that way." "Most people don't," Ava said coldly. "But that doesn't mean they don't do racist things." The room went silent. Jennifer Ortiz leaned forward. "Ms. Kingston, my client is genuinely remorseful. She's lost her job, her reputation, and she's received death threats. She's not asking for forgiveness. She's just asking for a chance to make this right." "Make it right how?" Ava asked. "By getting me to say something nice about her so she can get another job? By pretending this didn't happen?" "No," Rebecca said quickly. I don't want you to think I'm a monster. I made a mistake, a huge, horrible mistake, but I'm not a bad person." Ava stared at her for a long moment. Then she said, "You know what the worst part is? You probably don't even remember all the other passengers you've treated like this. The ones who didn't have a billionaire father, the ones who didn't have a platform, the ones who just had to sit there and take it because they didn't have any other choice." Rebecca's face went pale. "How many, Rebecca?" Ava pressed. "How many people did you look at and decide they didn't belong? How many times did you make someone feel small because you didn't think they fit?" You don't know. Because it didn't matter to you. They didn't matter to you." Rebecca broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Ava stood up. "I'm done here." "Ms. Kingston," Jennifer said quickly, "if we can't come to an understanding, then sue me," Ava said, her voice icy. "I have the video, I have the receipts, and I have an entire legal team that's ready to bury you in paperwork for the next 5 years. So go ahead, take your shot." She turned and walked out of the room, her father and David following close behind. As they stepped into the elevator, Donovan looked at his daughter. "You okay?" "No," Ava said, her voice shaking. "I thought seeing her would make me feel better. I thought hearing her apologize would, I don't know, mean something. And it didn't. It just made me angrier, because she's not sorry she did it. She's sorry she got caught." Donovan put a hand on her shoulder. "Then we keep fighting." Ava nodded, blinking back tears. But as the elevator descended, a cold dread settled in her chest. This isn't over. This is just the beginning. That night, Rebecca Miles sat in her apartment, staring at her laptop. Her lawyer had advised against it. Her friends had begged her not to, but she was desperate, and desperation made people reckless. She opened a blank document and started typing. By morning, her statement would be live on every news site and social media platform, and Ava Kingston's life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. The stakes just got higher. Rebecca's about to fight back. But what's in that statement? And how will Ava respond? Let me know your theories in the comments, and if you're invested in this story, hit that subscribe button. Ava woke up to 347 missed calls. Her phone was vibrating so violently on her nightstand that it had nearly fallen off. She grabbed it, still groggy, and saw the notifications flooding in. Texts from Zara, voicemails from her father, emails from reporters, DMs from strangers, and one alert that made her blood run cold, Google News alert, Ava Kingston. She clicked on it, and her entire world tilted. Rebecca Miles breaks silence. I was set up by Ava Kingston. The article was everywhere. CNN, Fox News, The New York Times, TMZ, every major outlet had picked it up within hours of Rebecca's statement going live. Ava's hands shook as she read. In a lengthy statement posted to social media early this morning, former Nova Air flight attendant Rebecca Miles claims that she was manipulated and publicly humiliated by Ava Kingston, daughter of Nova Air CEO Donovan Kingston. "I made a mistake on that flight," Miles wrote. "I admit that. But what happened at the leadership conference wasn't about accountability. It was about revenge." Ava Kingston used her father's power and resources to orchestrate a public execution of my character. She could have handled this privately. She could have filed a complaint through the proper channels. Instead, she chose to destroy my life in front of hundreds of people and millions more online. Miles went on to claim that she has received death threats, lost her health insurance, and has been unable to find employment since the incident. "I'm not the villain Ava Kingston wants me to be," Miles wrote. "I'm a single mother. I have a mortgage, I have bills, and now I have nothing, because a billionaire's daughter decided to make an example out of me. The statement has sparked intense debate online, with many questioning whether Kingston's actions were justified or an abuse of privilege. Ava set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Single mother. Rebecca had never mentioned a child, not in the meeting, not in any of the articles. But the detail was perfect, calculated, designed to flip the narrative. Suddenly, Ava wasn't the victim anymore. She was the villain. By the time Ava made it downstairs, her entire family was gathered in the kitchen. Her father was on the phone, pacing near the window, his voice low and clipped. Her mother was at the table, scrolling through her tablet with a tight expression. Isaiah sat across from her, looking uncomfortable and confused. "What's going on?" he asked when Ava walked in. "Your sister's trending again," Simone said flatly. "But not in a good way." Ava poured herself a cup of coffee with trembling hands. "I saw." Donovan hung up and turned to face her. "That was David. He says Rebecca's lawyer is already booking TV interviews. They're planning a full media blitz." "Of course they are," Ava muttered. "Baby girl, we need to respond, and fast. If we let this narrative take hold—" "What do you want me to say, Dad?" Ava snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. "That I'm sorry? That I should have just let it go? That Rebecca Miles deserves sympathy because she has a kid?" "No one's saying that," Simone said gently. "But you need to be strategic here. Right now, people are seeing you as a rich girl who used her power to crush someone beneath her. We need to remind them why this happened in the first place." Ava set her coffee down, her hands still shaking. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," Donovan said firmly. "No, I can't." Ava's voice cracked. "I thought I could. I thought standing up would make a difference. But all I did was make everything worse. Rebecca's playing the victim. I look like a monster. And nothing's actually changed." Simone stood and crossed to her daughter, placing both hands on Ava's shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not the villain in this story. Rebecca Miles humiliated you. She treated you like you didn't belong. And when she got called out for it, she couldn't handle the consequences. That's on her, not you. But, no buts, you told the truth. And sometimes the truth makes people uncomfortable. That doesn't mean you were wrong." Ava's eyes filled with tears. "Then why does it feel like I'm losing?" "Because you're in the hard part," Donovan said quietly. "The part where people push back. The part where you have to decide if you really believe in what you started. And I need to know right now, baby girl, do you believe in this?" Ava looked at her father, then at her mother, then down at her own hands. She thought about Rebecca's voice on that flight, the cold dismissal, the humiliation. She thought about the generic apology email, the $200 voucher. She thought about all the passengers who'd experienced the same thing and had no one to stand up for them. And she thought about what her father had taught her when she was 7 years old. When you know your voice matters, you can whisper and the whole room will lean in. Ava wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "Yeah," she said. "I believe in this." Donovan smiled. "Then let's fight back." 2 hours later, Ava sat in Nova Air's media studio, a sleek room with professional lighting and a camera setup that rivaled any news network. Her hair was styled, her makeup was done. She wore a simple but elegant burgundy blouse that her mother had picked out. She looked calm, composed, powerful. Inside, she was terrified. David Brennan stood off to the side, reviewing notes. Patricia Hughes was on the phone coordinating with the PR team. Donovan sat in a chair nearby, watching his daughter with quiet pride. "You ready?" the videographer asked. Ava took a deep breath. "Yeah, let's do this." The camera light turned red, and Ava began to speak. "My name is Ava Kingston, and I want to address the statement released by Rebecca Miles this morning." Her voice was steady, clear. "First, I want to acknowledge that Ms. Miles is going through a difficult time. I don't take any pleasure in that, but I also want to be very clear about what actually happened and why it matters." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "On Flight 447, I was denied service because Rebecca Miles looked at me and decided I didn't belong in first class. Not because I didn't have a ticket, not because I was rude or disruptive, but because of how I looked, and when I showed her my boarding pass, she leaned in and told me not to make a scene." Ava's jaw tightened. That's not a mistake. That's not a misunderstanding. That's discrimination. And it happens every single day to people who don't have the resources or platform to speak up. She leaned forward slightly. Rebecca Miles is claiming that I set her up, that I orchestrated a public humiliation. But here's what she's not telling you. I filed a complaint anonymously first. I wanted to see how Nova Air would handle it when they didn't know I was Donovan Kingston's daughter. And you know what I got? A generic apology and a voucher. No investigation. No accountability. Nothing. Her voice grew stronger. So yes, I brought it to the leadership conference, not for revenge, but because silence protects the wrong people. And if the only way to get real change is to make people uncomfortable, then I'm okay with that. She paused again, letting her words land. Ms. Miles says she has a child. I didn't know that until this morning. But that doesn't change what she did. Being a parent doesn't give you a free pass to treat people with cruelty, and losing your job because of your own actions isn't persecution. It's consequence. Ava's expression softened slightly. I don't want to destroy Rebecca Miles. I never did. But I also refuse to apologize for standing up for myself and for everyone else who's been treated this way. Because if we don't speak up, if we stay silent to make other people comfortable, nothing ever changes. She took a breath. So, to anyone watching this who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong, who's ever been dismissed or humiliated or told to not make a scene, you do belong. Your voice matters, and you don't have to stay silent. Ava looked directly into the camera one last time. Thank you. The red light turned off. The room was silent for a moment. Then Patricia started clapping. David nodded approvingly. The videographer gave a thumbs up, and Donovan stood, walked over to his daughter, and pulled her into a tight hug. That, he said quietly, was perfect. Within 3 hours, Ava's response video had gone viral. The comments section exploded with support. This is what accountability looks like. Ava didn't back down. Respect. Rebecca tried to play victim, and Ava shut it down with facts. I've been in Ava's position. Thank you for speaking up. Major news outlets picked up the story again, this time with a different angle. Ava Kingston responds to Rebecca Miles. Silence protects the wrong people. Nova Air heiress refuses to apologize. You do belong. The Ava Kingston versus Rebecca Miles. Debate, who's right? The tide was turning, slowly, but it was turning. That evening, Ava sat on the couch in her parents' living room, her phone buzzing nonstop with messages of support. Zara had sent a string of fire emojis, and the message, "That's my girl." Isaiah had texted, "You were so cool. Can I show my friends?" Even strangers were reaching out, people sharing their own stories of discrimination, thanking her for speaking up, telling her she'd given them courage. Her mother brought her a cup of tea and sat down beside her. "How are you feeling?" Simone asked. Ava smiled tiredly. "Like I just ran a marathon." "You kind of did." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Ava said, "Do you think I did the right thing?" "I think you did the brave thing," Simone said. "And sometimes that's the same as the right thing. Sometimes it's not. But either way, you stood up for yourself. And that matters." Ava leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "Thanks, Mama." "Always, baby." Across town, in her cramped apartment, Rebecca Miles sat in the dark, staring at her laptop. The comments on her statement were brutal. "Nice try playing the victim card. Maybe don't be racist next time. Single mother or not, you still treated that girl like trash." Her phone rang. Jennifer Ortiz. "We need to talk," the lawyer said without preamble. "What now?" Rebecca asked wearily. "Ava Kingston's response is everywhere, and it's working. Public opinion is shifting back in her favor. So what do I do?" There was a long pause. "You could apologize, publicly. No qualifiers, no excuses. Just own what you did and ask for forgiveness." Rebecca's throat tightened. "And if I don't?" "Then you ride this out and hope people forget. But I'll be honest, Rebecca. I don't think they will." Rebecca closed her eyes. She'd spent the last week trying to salvage her reputation, trying to spin the narrative, trying to make herself the victim. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe she'd been the villain all along. The battle isn't over yet, but Ava just gained the upper hand. Will Rebecca finally take real accountability? Or is there one more twist coming? Drop your predictions below, and if this story has you hooked, smash that subscribe button. 3 days after Ava's video went viral, Rebecca Miles did something no one expected. She posted another statement. But this time, it was different. The post went live at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. No lawyer speak. No carefully crafted narrative. Just Rebecca sitting in her living room, holding her phone, looking exhausted and raw. The video was shaky, unpolished, real. "My name is Rebecca Miles," she began, her voice hoarse. "And I need to tell you the truth." She took a shaky breath. "When I posted that statement a few days ago, I was angry. I was scared. I'd lost my job, my reputation, and I was desperate to make people see me as something other than the villain. So I played the victim. I talked about being a single mother. I made it sound like Ava Kingston was some vindictive rich girl who destroyed my life for fun." Her eyes filled with tears. "But that's not what happened, and you deserve to know the truth." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I did treat Ava Kingston differently on that flight. I looked at her, a young black woman in a hoodie, and I made assumptions. I decided she didn't belong in first class. And when she showed me her ticket, instead of apologizing, I doubled down. I told her not to make a scene, and I walked away." Rebecca's voice broke. "I didn't think about how that must have felt for her. I didn't think about all the other passengers who saw what I did and said nothing. I didn't think about how many times I'd probably done the same thing to other people without even realizing it." She paused, staring directly into the camera. "I was wrong. Not just wrong. I was cruel, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She took another shaky breath. "Ava Kingston didn't destroy my life. I did. I made the choice to treat her that way. I made the choice to let my biases guide my actions, and when I got called out for it, instead of taking responsibility, I tried to make myself the victim." She shook her head. "But I'm not the victim. Ava is. And so is every other person who's ever been treated like they don't belong because of how they look." Rebecca's voice steadied slightly. "I don't know if Ava will ever see this. I don't know if she'll ever forgive me. And honestly, I don't deserve her forgiveness. But I needed to say this publicly, the same way I tried to tear her down publicly, because silence protects the wrong people, and I've been silent for too long." She wiped her eyes again. "To Ava, I'm sorry. You deserved better, and to everyone else who's ever been in your position, you deserve better too." The video ended. By noon, Rebecca's apology had been viewed over 2 million times. The response was swift and overwhelming. This is what a real apology looks like. Rebecca finally owned it. Respect. Still doesn't undo the damage, but at least she's telling the truth now. I hope Ava sees this. News outlets scrambled to cover the story again. Rebecca Miles issues tearful apology to Ava Kingston. Former flight attendant takes full responsibility. "I was wrong." The power of accountability, how one woman's apology changed the conversation. But the question on everyone's mind was the same. What will Ava Kingston say? Ava saw the video at breakfast. Zara had sent it to her with a single message. "You need to watch this." Ava sat at the kitchen table, her mother beside her, and pressed play. She watched in silence as Rebecca spoke, watched her cry, watched her take full responsibility. When it ended, Ava set her phone down and stared at the screen. "Wow," Simone said quietly. "Yeah," Ava whispered. "How do you feel?" Ava didn't answer right away. She just sat there, letting the weight of Rebecca's words settle over her. Finally, she said, "I don't know. Part of me wants to believe her. Part of me thinks it's just damage control." "Maybe it's both," Simone offered. "People can be genuinely sorry and still be trying to save themselves. The two aren't mutually exclusive." Ava looked at her mother. "Do you think I should respond?" "That depends. Do you want to?" Ava thought about it, about Rebecca's tears, about the words, "You deserved better." And she realized something. She didn't need Rebecca's apology. She'd never needed it. What she needed was for the system to change, for Nova Air and every other company to take discrimination seriously, for people to be held accountable, and that was already happening. "No," Ava said finally. "I don't think I need to respond. Rebecca said what she needed to say. And I've already said what I needed to say. Anything more is just noise." Simone smiled and squeezed her hand. "That's very wise, baby." "I learned from the best," Ava said with a small smile. But while Ava chose silence, the world around her kept moving. Nova Air's stock, which had taken a hit in the days following the conference, began to recover. The Customer Integrity and Equality Initiative was officially launched, with Ava at the helm. Applications for the anonymous complaint hotline flooded in, hundreds of passengers sharing stories that had been buried for years. Major corporations reached out, asking Ava to consult on their own diversity programs. Universities invited her to speak. Magazines wanted interviews. Ava Kingston, at 23 years old, had become the face of corporate accountability. But she didn't let it go to her head. She worked quietly, diligently, reviewing complaints, meeting with HR teams, designing training programs that actually meant something. She turned down most of the interview requests. She stayed off social media. She focused on the work, because that's what mattered. 6 weeks after the conference, Ava received a letter. It arrived at Nova Air headquarters, addressed to her personally. No return address. Just a plain white envelope with her name written in careful cursive. She opened it in her office, a small but elegant space on the same floor as her father's, with a view of the city and a desk covered in sketches for a new uniform design she was working on. Inside the envelope was a single piece of paper. "Dear Ava, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to respond. But I needed to write it anyway. I've spent the last 6 weeks in therapy. My counselor suggested I write this letter, not to send, but just to process everything that's happened. But then I realized, you deserve to hear this, even if you never write back. I've been thinking a lot about why I treated you the way I did on that flight, and the truth is, I don't have a good answer. I'd like to say it was a one-time mistake, but I don't think it was. I think I've been carrying biases for years without even realizing it. I think I've treated other people the same way and never thought twice about it. That terrifies me. Losing my job was devastating, but it also forced me to look at myself in a way I never had before, and what I saw wasn't pretty. I'm not writing this to ask for your forgiveness. I don't think I deserve that. I'm writing this to say thank you. Thank you for not staying silent. Thank you for holding me accountable. Thank you for using your voice when it would have been easier to just let it go. You changed my life, and maybe, in some small way, I'll be able to change someone else's because of it. I hope you're doing well. I hope the work you're doing makes a real difference. And I hope that someday, when you think about what happened on that flight, you don't just remember the pain, you remember that you turned it into something meaningful. With sincere regret and gratitude, Rebecca Miles Ava read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, tucked it into her desk drawer, and went back to work. She didn't respond, but she kept the letter, because it was proof that people could change, and sometimes that was enough. 3 months after the conference, Nova Air held its first ever Diversity and Inclusion Summit. The event was held at the same venue, the Grand Marquis Hotel, and the ballroom was packed. Employees from every level of the company, community leaders, diversity consultants, and members of the press. Ava stood backstage, adjusting the collar of her tailored black blazer. Her father stood beside her, calm and steady as always. "You nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," Ava admitted. "Good. That means you care." Ava smiled. "Thanks, Dad. You ready?" She took a deep breath. "Yeah, I'm ready." The lights dimmed, the crowd quieted, and Donovan Kingston walked onto the stage. The applause was warm, respectful. "Good afternoon," he said into the microphone. "Thank you all for being here. 3 months ago, we stood in this very room and confronted a painful truth, that our company, a company built on the promise of world-class service for every traveler, had failed some of those travelers." He paused, letting the words settle. But failure doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of something better. He gestured toward the side of the stage. Today, I'm honored to introduce someone who's been leading that change, someone who's been fearless, thoughtful, and deeply committed to making Nova Air a company we can all be proud of. The spotlight shifted. Please welcome Ava Kingston. The applause was deafening. Ava walked onto the stage, her heart pounding, her hands steady. She took the microphone from her father and looked out at the crowd. 500 faces, all watching, all waiting. She smiled. Thank you, she said. And thank you for being here. Because this work, it doesn't happen in boardrooms or press releases. It happens here, with all of us, together. She took a breath. 3 months ago, I told a story about what happened to me on a flight, and a lot of people heard it. But the story didn't end there. It's still being written, every day, in every interaction between staff and passengers, in every decision we make as a company, in every choice you make as individuals. She paused. This summit isn't about congratulating ourselves. It's about doing the hard work, the uncomfortable work, the work that asks us to look at our own biases and challenge them, the work that asks us to listen to voices we might not have heard before, the work that asks us to do better, not because it's easy, but because it's right. The room was silent, attentive. So today, we're launching the next phase of the Customer Integrity and Equality Initiative. We're implementing mandatory bias training for all employees. We're creating accountability structures that ensure complaints are handled fairly and transparently. And we're opening up this conversation, not just within Nova Air, but across the industry. She looked directly at the audience, because if we don't do this work, if we stay comfortable, if we stay silent, nothing changes. But if we do the work, if we commit to it, truly commit, then maybe we can build something better, not just for Nova Air, but for everyone. The applause started slowly, then it grew and grew until the entire room was on its feet. After the summit, Ava found a quiet corner in the hotel lobby and sat down, exhausted but exhilarated. Her father found her a few minutes later, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He sat down beside her and handed her one. "You did good, baby girl," he said. "Thanks, Dad." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching people file out of the ballroom, chatting excitedly about the day's presentations. "So," Donovan said, "what's next for you?" Ava smiled. "I don't know. Keep doing this work, I guess. Maybe start my own consulting firm someday. Help other companies figure this out. I think you'd be great at that." "Yeah?" "Yeah." He looked at her with that same proud smile he'd been wearing since she was 7. "You've got your mother's heart and my stubbornness. That's a powerful combination." Ava laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should." They sat there a little longer, sipping their coffee, watching the world move around them. And for the first time in months, Ava felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Justice has been served. Change has begun. But there's still one final chapter to this story. What do you think happens next for Ava? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. 6 months later. The private jet cut through the clouds at 35,000 feet, its engines humming a steady, reassuring rhythm. Ava Kingston sat by the window, watching the earth far below, a patchwork of greens and browns, cities reduced to tiny grids of light, the world impossibly small from up here. She smiled. It had been 6 months since the leadership conference, 6 months since she'd stood on that stage and changed her life forever. And in that time, so much had shifted. The Customer Integrity and Equality Initiative wasn't just a program anymore, it was a movement. 15 other airlines had reached out to Nova Air, asking to implement similar frameworks. Ava had been featured in Forbes, Time, and Essence. She'd delivered keynote speeches at 3 major conferences, and she'd received hundreds of letters from passengers, people of all backgrounds, thanking her for speaking up. But the most important change had been internal. At Nova Air, employee culture had shifted dramatically. The anonymous complaint hotline had received over 2,000 reports in the first 3 months alone, everything from microaggressions to outright discrimination. Each case was investigated thoroughly. Some employees were retrained, others were let go, and the message was clear. This company will not tolerate prejudice. Period. It hadn't been easy. There'd been pushback from the union, grumbling from middle management, think pieces questioning whether the changes were too extreme. But Donovan had stood firm, and Ava had stood beside him. Together, they'd built something real. Now Ava was on her way to London, not for work, not for an interview, just because. She'd finished the first major phase of the initiative. The systems were in place, the training programs were running. Patricia Hughes and her team could handle the day-to-day operations. Ava needed a break, and she'd been thinking about that design internship she'd left behind 6 months ago. The agency in East London, the little studio where she'd spent long nights sketching dresses and dreaming about building something that was entirely hers. She'd called her old supervisor, Brian, not Brian the driver, but Brian Ward, a brilliant designer with an eye for emerging talent, and asked if there might still be a place for her. "Are you kidding?" Brian had said, laughing. "You're Ava Kingston. You could work anywhere. Why would you come back here?" "Because I want to," Ava had said simply. "I want to design. I want to create. I want to do something that's mine, not because of my last name, but because I'm good at it." There'd been a pause. Then Brian had said, "When can you start?" So here she was, flying back to London, back to the life she'd left behind. But this time, she wasn't running from her name. She was building something alongside it. The jet began its descent into London Heathrow. Ava gathered her things, her carry-on bag, her sketchbook, her phone. She scrolled through her messages one last time before landing. A text from Zara. "Go get him, babe. Don't forget about us little people when you're a famous designer." A text from Isaiah. "Bring me back something cool, not a keychain, something actually cool." A text from her mother. "So proud of you, baby. Call me when you land." And a text from her father. "Remember what I told you when you were 7? Ava smiled and typed back, "When you know your voice matters, you can whisper, and the whole room will lean in." Donovan's response came immediately. "Exactly. Now go build your empire." The plane touched down smoothly. Ava stepped off the jet, walked through the private terminal, and emerged into the arrivals hall. London was gray and drizzly, exactly as she remembered. The air smelled like rain and diesel and possibility. She took a deep breath and smiled. I'm home. 3 months later. Ava's new design collection debuted at London Fashion Week. It was a small show, not one of the big-name runway spectacles, but an intimate presentation in a converted warehouse in Shoreditch. The audience was a mix of fashion insiders, influencers, and a handful of friends and family who'd flown in to support her. The collection was called Elevation. Each piece was designed around the concept of taking up space: bold silhouettes, rich textures, unapologetic colors. Ava had poured everything into it: her anger, her pride, her determination to be seen not in spite of who she was, but because of it. As the models walked the runway, Ava stood backstage, her heart pounding, her hands clasped tightly together. The final model stepped out, a tall, stunning black woman in a flowing emerald gown with sharp, architectural shoulders. The dress moved like water, powerful and graceful all at once. The audience erupted in applause. Ava closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. This is real. This is mine. After the show, Ava stood in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by well-wishers and buyers and reporters asking for quotes. Her parents were there, beaming with pride. Isaiah was there, taking photos with his phone and looking genuinely impressed. Zara was there, crying happy tears and hugging Ava so tightly she could barely breathe. "You did it," Zara whispered. "You actually did it." "We're just getting started," Ava said with a grin. Brian Ward appeared at her elbow, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He handed her one. "To Ava Kingston," he said, raising his glass. "Designer, activist, absolute legend." Ava laughed and clinked her glass against his. to new beginnings. Later that evening, after the crowd had dispersed and the warehouse was quiet again, Ava stood alone on the empty runway. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. There was something she'd been thinking about for weeks, something she needed to write down. She typed slowly, carefully. Power isn't about shouting the loudest. It isn't about who has the most money or the biggest platform or the most famous name. Power is about using your voice, whatever voice you have, to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, even when people tell you to stay quiet. I didn't ask to become the face of corporate accountability. I didn't set out to change an industry. I just wanted someone to hear me when I said, that wasn't okay. And they did. Not because I'm Donovan Kingston's daughter, but because I refuse to let silence protect the wrong people. So to anyone reading this who's ever felt invisible, who's ever been told they don't belong, who's ever been made to feel small, you matter, your voice matters, and you don't have to stay quiet. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth, and let the world lean in to listen. Ava saved the note and smiled. Then she walked out of the warehouse and into the rainy London night, ready for whatever came next. 1 year later. Ava sat in her father's office at Nova Air headquarters, reviewing the latest quarterly report on the Customer Integrity and Equality Initiative. The numbers were staggering. Anonymous complaints had led to over 500 employee retrainings. 32 employees had been terminated for repeated violations. Customer satisfaction ratings among passengers of color had increased by 47%, and Nova Air had been recognized by the International Air Transport Association as a leader in diversity and inclusion. But the numbers that mattered most to Ava were the stories. The emails from passengers who said they finally felt safe flying. The letters from employees who said the training had changed how they saw the world. The messages from parents who said their kids could now dream of working in aviation without fear. Those were the wins that counted. Donovan walked into the office, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Ava and sat down across from her. "Proud of you, baby girl," he said. "Thanks, Dad, but this was never just about me. It was about all of us." "I know, but you started it. You had the courage to speak up when it would have been easier to stay quiet." Ava smiled. "I learned from the best." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee, looking out at the city skyline. Then Donovan said, "So, I've been thinking." "Uh-oh, that's dangerous." He laughed. "I'm serious. I've been thinking about succession planning, about the future of Nova Air. And I want you to know, whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, there's a place for you here. Not because you're my daughter, but because you're brilliant." Ava's throat tightened. "Dad?" "I'm not asking you to decide now. You've got your design career. You've got your consulting work. You've got a whole life ahead of you. But I want you to know the door is open, always." Ava reached across the desk and took her father's hand. "Thank you. That means everything to me." "You mean everything to me," Donovan said quietly. "You and your brother and your mother. You're the reason I built this company, and you're the reason I'll keep fighting to make it better." Ava squeezed his hand. "Love you, Dad. Love you too, baby girl." That evening, Ava stood by the window of her father's private jet, watching planes take off from JFK. She'd been asked to fly commercial for an interview about the initiative. A full-circle moment that the media was eating up, but her father had insisted she take the jet instead. "You've earned it," he'd said, "and besides, I want you to arrive rested and ready. You've got a lot of work ahead of you." Now, as she watched plane after plane lift into the sky, Ava thought about how far she'd come. A year ago, she'd been humiliated on a flight, treated like she didn't belong, made to feel small in a space she'd paid to occupy. And now she was standing in her father's jet, preparing to fly across the country to talk about how she'd changed an entire industry. Poetic justice, she thought with a smile. Her phone buzzed. A text from Zara. "Zara, saw your interview got rescheduled. You good?" Ava. "Yeah, just taking a minute to appreciate how wild this all is." Zara. You're a literal icon. Enjoy it. Ava, I'm trying. Love you. Zara, love you more. Ava pocketed her phone and took one last look at the planes outside. Then she turned, settled into her seat, and opened her laptop. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But for the first time in her life, Ava Kingston wasn't doing it to prove anything to anyone. She was doing it because it mattered, and that made all the difference. As the jet lifted into the air, Ava's voiceover echoed softly. Power isn't about shouting the loudest. Sometimes it's about staying silent long enough for the world to hear the truth echo back. And when you finally speak, make sure every word counts, because the people who need to hear you, they're listening. They've always been listening. They were just waiting for someone brave enough to make them lean in. The screen faded to black, and the story ended. Not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with hope, purpose, and the quiet strength of a woman who'd turned her pain into power. The end. And that's it, beautiful souls. Ava's story. From humiliation to transformation, from silence to strength. I hope this one hit you right in the heart. If it did, drop a comment and let me know your favorite moment from this journey. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, because there are so many more stories like this one waiting to be told. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, your voice matters, always. See you in the next one.